Welcome into the local angle. I'm Brian Barrett from Off the Pike, and we are creeping closer to the start of training camp, and we still do not have an answer on DeAndre Hopkins. It feels like that 2-day visit that the Patriots and Bill Belichick had with Hopkins, it feels like 2 years ago. It feels like an eternity ago. So we do have a couple of updates this week, and there's one I find quite amusing, and there's one I find quite troubling. So let's start with the amusing portion of this first, and that comes from Jeff Darlington from ESPN, of course, an NFL insider. He said this week, quote, "My understanding with the Bills is they love DeAndre Hopkins, and he'd be a great addition, but they're not going to pay him. If he wants to ring chase, there's a spot for him." Okay, so first of all, let me just start with this. Where did the Bills get this level of arrogance? Hey, DeAndre, if you want to play for nothing, the equivalent of getting like a veteran minimum in the NBA, well then, hey, come play for us. The Bills are trying to sell him on ring chasing? Did I miss something? The Bills lost 27-10 against the Bengals in the divisional round last year, right? They lost 42-36 in that epic choke job 2 years ago in the divisional round. So back-to-back years, they haven't even been to the conference championship. They went to the conference championship in 2020, but they lost 38-24 to the Kansas City Chiefs. So this core of players that the Bills are selling DeAndre Hopkins on ring chasing with, they've made the AFC title game once together. They haven't won anything. Heck, Rex Ryan and his Jets teams accomplished more in the back-to-back AFC title appearances, right? They made it to back-to-back AFC title games. The Bills haven't even done that. Ring chasers go to teams that win rings, like Durant went to the Warriors, or like the Patriots. They were selling legit winning. This is why guys like Junior Seau, Chris Long, and Darrelle Revis, those type of players came to the Patriots. Someone tell me what the Bills have done. The Patriots' promise was simple, right? Hey, you come here, there's a pretty good chance you're going to the AFC title game. Yeah, guys, we get there almost every year. From 2001 to 2018, the Patriots played in 13 AFC title games, okay? So that's north of 72% of the time you are going to play in an AFC title game. And if you look at even the latter portion, when they got even more guys to come in on below market deals, think about it from this perspective. They made it to the AFC title game 8 consecutive seasons. It was basically the Patriots Invitational, right? The Bills have made one with this core, and it seems like they're further away now from winning a championship. They've had a rocky offseason as it pertains to the Stefan Diggs drama. So I just find it funny that the Bills are acting like they're the Brady Patriots. If the Chiefs were doing this, fine, you can totally understand it. They've already won 2 rings with Mahomes and company. But the AFC right now is loaded. The Chiefs and the Bengals are both better than the Bills, and the Ravens are on the rise as they made some nice additions to the offseason, and Lamar got his contract, so you're not going to have that drama. And the Dolphins are a team on the rise, as we saw, as long as Tua is healthy. And even the Jaguars, they made it to the playoffs last year with Trevor Lawrence. So I would not be shocked if Buffalo actually takes a step back next season. So I'm not worried about the Bills getting into the Hopkins mix because their pitch is not good. Hey, come ring chase, DeAndre, even though we don't win rings. So I just found that whole thing amusing with the Buffalo Bills this week, that they're trying to sell DeAndre Hopkins on. You can come here and win a ring based on what evidence? You don't really have any evidence if you're Buffalo. But here's what I find troublesome. And this is from Mike Reese, the great Patriots beat reporter. This is from an article earlier this week. Quote, according to sources close to the situation, the Tennessee Titans and the Patriots have made offers. The Titans have been more aggressive to this point, and Hopkins hasn't been in a rush to sign. One reason for Hopkins to wait a bit longer is to leave open the possibility of another team entering the mix, potentially increasing his market. Okay, so why aren't the Patriots showing as much interest as the Tennessee Titans? This is annoying from my perspective. And here's the thing. The Patriots right now, they have the ability to flex their financial muscles, if you will, and just end this thing. So if you look at it via over the cap, right, which tracks salary cap space in the NFL, the Patriots have about 17.7 million. The Titans are at 8.3. So the Patriots could just basically overwhelm Hopkins with an offer that's better than Tennessee's. But clearly, they haven't, because he's still deciding where he's going to go. So they haven't made that Godfather offer, if you will. And I just don't really understand why. The young quarterback, Mac Jones, after a down season, he needs a legit weapon. Bill Belichick's decision last year to have Matt Patricia run the offense halted Mac's development last season. You have Bill O'Brien in the mix now to fix a huge problem, but why not go get Hopkins to fix the rest of your issues? The Patriots need a legitimate weapon. It makes everybody else sort of fit into place. Juju will thrive as the number 2 like he did with Kelsey and Antonio Brown when he was in Pittsburgh. It just makes everybody's job easier, right? And if you look at it, I really like the Juju addition. He was 15th in yak per reception last year among qualified receivers and tight ends at 6.1 yards after the catch per reception. So he can create after the catch. That's something I really like with Mac because you want Mac to get the ball out quickly, right? As somebody that can't really improvise and extend plays with his legs. But that was as the number 2 guy behind Kelsey, right? Juju's 3 best seasons in terms of receiving yards per game. 65.5 his rookie year in 17, 89.1 in 18 his second season, and 58.3 yards per game last year. In all 3 of those seasons, he was the number 2 option behind Antonio Brown and Travis Kelsey. So if you want the best out of Juju Smith-Schuster, you get a number 1 receiver. That number 1 receiver is available right now in DeAndre Hopkins, right? So here's my thing. The Patriots, they feel the same way. If they do, I should say, feel the same way as me, that they need to add a legitimate number 1 weapon. And look, maybe they disagree with me, but I would disagree with them. But let's assume for the sake of this hypothetical that they do think they need a number 1, right? And they're meeting with DeAndre Hopkins, so they must at least think for some reason they do. So if this is the case and you have more than double the cap space that the Titans have, why not just blow over DeAndre Hopkins with an offer? Give him more than Tennessee is offering, especially in that year 1, to make it impossible for him to say no to the Patriots offer, right? Make him come here because you just offered him more than anybody else. And it isn't like a number 1 receiver is just going to fall in your lap anytime soon. This opportunity is there for you, right? And in an ideal world for DeAndre Hopkins himself, he has a bunch of premium contenders that are competing for his services. But the problem for Hopkins is this. Most of the contenders don't have the financial ability from a salary cap perspective, and some of them don't need a number 1 receiver. Like a team I mentioned earlier, the Bengals, they have Chase, they have Higgins. They don't need Hopkins. So you need to jump on this opportunity because not many other number 1 receivers become available. They rarely reach free agency, right? Ordinarily, what happens with these guys is they get extended. In the past, if you think about it from a Patriots angle, they could play hardball with guys, right? They even did it with their own guys, Edelman, Hightower, McCourty. Hey guys, go see what's out there and come back with the deal, okay? And it usually worked for the Patriots because they were the Patriots and because they had that Brady guy. And it just seems like to me, if they're saying here, DeAndre, here's our best offer, see what else is out there. That's just not the way they should be operating in 2023. The Patriots have to sort of alter their free agent process. You're not the Brady Patriots, and look, you may still end up landing the guy. It may still happen. You may end up with DeAndre Hopkins. But why not just make life easier on yourself and just offer significantly more money than the Tennessee Titans? Don't let some big-time receiver go down in training camp for another team, right? And then it opens up a spot for Hopkins. Don't let it get to the point where you haven't him signed before training camp. The problem is Bill Belichick cannot operate as this is business as usual, right? You're now just like everybody else in the NFL because you don't have Tom Brady. For you to land guys, you have to make the best offer. That's just the reality you now live in, whether or not Belichick wants to accept that or not. And you can give me all this about, hey, if you pay a number 1 receiver, it's very difficult to build a team, right? If you're paying him all that money in terms of the percentage of the cap. Well, is paying A.J. Brown or Tyreek Hill or Stefan Diggs, are those deals not worth it? I just don't understand. This is now a position of the NFL that you really have to pay for. So I would argue it's actually more costly not to have big-time receivers than to overpay the guys. That's the reality of the NFL right now. So let's run through what some young, developing quarterbacks have gotten when they got a premium wide receiver. Let's start in the division with Josh Allen. So Josh Allen's second season, not great, 193.1 yards per game, 85.3 rating, and a 58.8 completion percentage. The Bills then traded after that season for Stefan Diggs prior to Allen's third season. Sound familiar? Mac entering year 3. The numbers, 284 yards per game, so he went up 90 yards per game. The rating jumped to 107.2, so up almost 22 points. The completion percentage was at 69.2%, so a jump of almost 10.5 percentage points. So certainly, Josh Allen, Brian Daboll, both those guys deserve the most credit. But having the Diggs guy kind of helped, didn't it? Just having that guy that was a legitimate bona fide number 1 option. How about a team that just made the Super Bowl last year? The Philadelphia Eagles. Jalen Hurts, second year, 209.6 yards per game, completed 61.3% of his passes, and an 87.2 rating. So if you look at those numbers, you say, hey, pretty pedestrian. Now, we do know that he creates a lot with his legs, but pretty pedestrian numbers. Okay, and there were some real conversations last year in Philadelphia. Are we sure that Jalen Hurts is the long-term starter? But then, as Jalen Hurts is entering year 3, again, does that sound familiar? Mac Jones entering year 3. Who did they trade for? A.J. Brown, a guy that I actually wanted the Patriots to trade for at the time because he's an absolute stud. I still don't know why Tennessee traded him, and Tennessee looks pretty dumb right now because now they're trying to get Hopkins when they already had A.J. Brown, a younger receiver. But anyway, Hurts goes to 246.7 yards per game, so up 37 yards, more than 37 yards, I should say. He completed 66.5% of his passes, up more than 5 percentage points, and his passer rating went to 101.5, so up more than 14 points. And Hurts had such a good season that the Philadelphia Eagles gave him a 5-year, $255 million contract extension. And yes, just like we talked with Allen, Hurts himself deserves a ton of credit for his improvement and the bulk of the credit. But having A.J. Brown, that dude, it certainly helped out. And look, I'm not saying that DeAndre Hopkins guarantees a Jalen Hurts or a Josh Allen leap in year 3 like we saw with those guys. But it certainly gives Mac Jones his best chance to make a leap in his year 3. So you fix your offensive coordinator position. I give the Patriots a ton of credit for that. And you had a really good draft. Adding a guy like Christian Gonzalez, that's massive for your defense going forward because it's the one thing you were missing, that shutdown corner, and you hope he can be that in his rookie season, right? And the one other thing you need to figure out is the number one receiver. And this is sort of how you can properly evaluate Mac Jones, is him with a legit offensive coordinator and a legit number one weapon. So I'm all in on DeAndre Hopkins. I just want the Patriots to be all in on DeAndre Hopkins. All right, a lot more coming up on the local angle. You'll hear from my buddy John Jastremski from New York, New York, Jason Goff from the Full Go in Chicago, and the guys from the Philly Special.
This episode is brought to you by Anytime Fitness. We may talk a whole lot about sports, but when it comes to keeping fit ourselves, there's definitely room for improvement. I hit this point early July. I was just like, I am not in good enough shape. I started trying to walk at least 15,000 steps a day, or hiking, or just anything to keep my legs moving. Now it's the end of 2023. I feel great. I had a physical 3 weeks ago, and the guy was like, you're doing great. You're doing better than you were 3 years ago. I felt great. Whatever your goals are, progress is possible thanks to Anytime Fitness. Get a personalized plan and support from an expert coach anytime, anywhere. Visit anytimefitness.com to try Anytime Fitness for free. Start to train for your life. Terms, conditions, and restrictions apply. See website for details. This episode is brought to you by Read, Write, Own, Building the Next Era of the Internet, a new book from entrepreneur and startup investor Chris Dixon. If you're listening to this podcast, you know what it's like to be part of a community of fans. You value the people who play, perform, and create for everyone. Well, what if there are more ways to support them, more ways to be a fan? And what if you had even more ways to connect with the teams, artists, and other creators that you love? Even though creators make the internet valuable, how much value do they get for their work? Well, that's mostly up to a few big tech companies. Shouldn't creators get more from the platforms they make successful? More value, but also more say, more control, more ownership? Read, Write, Own explores an alternative future for the internet, one that reclaims control for creators, fans, listeners, and gamers, the people who not only use the internet, but make it useful. Read, Write, Own imagines an internet built by us for us. So order your copy of the book today or learn more at readwriteown.com.
Welcome back to the local angle. It's the Philly Special. It's yours truly, Raheem Palmer, a.k.a. the Rostradamus. And we got my main man in the building. He's normally producing. He's normally hiding behind the scenes, making sure we all look good and sound good. It's my man, Clifford. Augustin, what's good, man?
Raheem, man, it's a pleasure to be on with the smartest dude probably on the Philly Special. It's between me. It's between you and Solak for the smartest guy on Philly Special. I don't know who it is.
Honestly, Solak got us all, man. That dude is a wizard. Like,
yeah,
he looks like he's like 17 years old, but he's like the 17-year-old who got into Harvard or MIT earlier and skipped a couple grades because
right.
I swear to God, he should be calling plays.
Yo, 100%. Solak is a genius. So you know what? Since the UPenn grad himself gave Solak that title, then I guess Solak, shout out to you, brother. We miss you too. We'll get back once the Eagles season starts to kick off. But shout out to you, brother. We miss you, man.
Yeah, so let's talk about the Philadelphia Phillies. We haven't done too much baseball, but this Philadelphia Phillies team right now, they're 48-41. They're third in the National League East, and they're coming off a pretty solid run. They're just a half game back from the NL wildcard spot. What do you feel like the first half of the season for the Phillies? Like, what's your grade and your assessment on how this team has played?
I think the Phillies probably get like a B- for me because I feel like they started off really, really slow. And as you see, in the last 31 if my math is correct, 32 games or so, they're 23-9. So the Phillies they've really picked it up since about June 2nd-ish. And I think going into the second half, they needed that break because dudes like Schwarber played every day. The pitching, obviously, we seen Aaron Nola's arm kind of, falter out during games, giving up 4 runs and, by like the 5th inning because he's pitched so much. Remember a deep playoff run last year and then going into this year, I think he's pitched the most innings in baseball as a starter. So, I mean, dudes needed a rest, man. And it's funny because the Phillies' best player, playing this year is Nick Castellanos. And he just went to the All-Star game and then, he helped the NL, win the All-Star game. So, these dudes needed a rest. But I feel like in the first half, it was a B- because it was a slow start. But then they started picking it up, towards the end. They got the best road record in baseball, I believe. And I think they could if they can capitalize on that, which means on the back end, they play the most road games in the MLB. On the back end, they'll have the most home games in the MLB. So, the sky's the limit. Once you get the home cooking, especially when the bank is lit up and everybody's going crazy, there's no telling, how much of a run they can make. I don't think they're going to get the NL East because the Braves are just too good. But, I think they definitely can solidify themselves in a wild card spot for sure.
One of the things that I find encouraging going into the second half of the year is that the Phillies already played 51 road games before the All-Star break, which is like crazy. A franchise high set in 1973. And they've gone to the West Coast a number of times. So one of the things that you'll find is that on the second half of the year is that the Phillies don't leave the Eastern time zone again until September 1st. So that's a huge advantage. Now,
for sure,
the one thing that I have to admit I'm a little concerned with is the rotation. You mentioned that Aaron Nola hasn't been the same guy. Is there any trade targets that you want to see this team go after, whether it's pitching, whether it's hitting? Is it like what kind of moves should we be making right now?
I think the pitching has been like decent. Because I think when it comes down to the playoffs, right, you really only need like 3 starters to be good, right? And I can rely on Nola. I can rely on Wheeler. And I think Taijuan Walker's been really good this year. Think about it. He's 10-3, 4.02 ERA and 18 starts. Like Taijuan's been super consistent this year. And I think I'd feel super comfortable with him going into the playoffs. Ranger Suarez, remember, another guy we had going into the playoffs last year. He's only 2-4, but he has a 3.77 ERA and 11 starts. So I don't think the starters are necessarily the problem. I think it's more so of like the guys like Junior Marte and maybe hopefully Sir Anthony Dominguez comes back healthy and Jose Alvarado's been like up and down. But this Christopher Sanchez guy is pretty solid too. I mean, 2.84 ERA and 5 starts.
And he's going to be starting the first game against the Padres coming up
so,
this week. So we get to see how he performs. And the Padres haven't been really good hitting, but they still have all the talent in the world.
Right. Yeah. I don't think the pitching is really a thing unless you want to get like a middle reliever or a guy, to eat up some innings to get the Kimbrel. Truthfully speaking, I just think the Nola thing scares me because of how many innings he's pitched these last couple of years. And people keep thinking it's like a contract thing that's on his mind. I really don't think the contract thing is eating up his mind because at the end of the day, he's going to get paid. Like Nola's, he's shown that he's better than, a lot of these pitchers in the MLB, whether you like it or not. Like I get it. He has those innings where he gives up like 4 runs and whatnot, but we've seen him be great. So I don't think he's worrying about the dollar amount. I think it's just his arm just might be cooked because, like I said, deep playoff run, he's pitched 119 innings this year already. That's a ton.
But see, that's my thing. If we're talking about our number one guy and his arm might be cooked, I think that puts us in a position.
I don't think it's cooked.
That puts.
Maybe
it's not cooked, but that puts us in a position to where we need another guy. And there's some guys out there, maybe a Lucas Giolito. There's a Jordan Montgomery. There's guys out there. So you have to wonder, do we make another move for just another starter?
Right, and I don't know what the price tag is going to be for another starter, because you know how it is at the trade deadline. A lot of people will end up asking for like half your farm system for a starter, and I don't think Dombrowski thinks it's that desperate. I think they kind of want to see how Nola looks for at least the next couple starts, and then they might figure it out from there. But I think the real trade deadline thing is whether you're going to get a corner outfielder or a corner infielder. That being, to put Schwarber back in the DH position, depending if Bryce Harper can go to first base like he says he can, when obviously when his arm is healed and coming off that Tommy John surgery. And I think first base suits him more rather than Schwarber being a corner outfielder. And then maybe you want to bring in Pache every day, because that dude's been super clutch, has some super clutch moments for the Phillies this year. Like, I like him a lot. I don't know if he's an everyday guy. He might be exposed for everyday guy, but I don't know, man. Like, I feel like I'm just kind of confident in him when he goes up to the plate, like what he just did versus the Marlins in that first game of the last series where the Phillies ended up winning 4-3 because he hit a late 2-run bomb. And he feels really well too. Like, I like his glove work. Obviously, we can't have Schwarber out. If the Phillies are a serious team, Schwarber can't be out there every day in the outfield, nor can he play every single day. So he needs to get back.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah, and he needs to get back to DHing. And I think Bryce is probably going to pull through and play first, because remember, when you play first base, you don't necessarily have to throw the ball a lot, so it doesn't put your arm at much risk. He just simply can't play outfield or any other position because obviously his arm is still healing from the Tommy John surgery, and he hasn't been. I think he's a guy that needs to be like, this is going to sound weird, but like stimulated by like being in the field every day. You know what I mean? Like really being active and not just getting up for those 4 at bats and like having to swing away, having to warm up. I feel like he needs to like move his body and be active. And first base is super active, right? Like every ground ball goes to first base, and he can be lively and he can talk to whoever gets on base too. Like, he just seems like a dude that just needs to be like actually on the field every single day. And that's what gets him ticking. I don't think this whole DH thing is his steez, and it's shown. He hasn't hit a home run in like 160 at bats or something like that. So he's struggling. I think the power is going to come back, obviously once his arm gets better. But I'm really looking at that corner outfield position, depending on if Harper can come back and play first, and if Schwarber can play DH, because then you will really look for an outfielder, and then maybe a corner infielder, because I don't think they think Sosa's really a every single day guy. I like Sosa, but I'm not really high on him. You know what I mean? As far as like as far as hitting goes. So we'll see what happens with corner outfield and corner infield.
Are there any trade targets in the outfield do you like? I can kind of give you a list of names, like a Cody Bellinger, a Lane Thomas from the Nationals, a Mark Canha from the Nets, Adam Duvall from the Red Sox, or a Tyler O'Neill, or any of those guys.
Yeah, it's funny because I saw the Mets guys like being, named in Phillies trade talks, and I'm like, how the hell is that going to work? Like, what are they going to act? What's the asking price for the guys on the Mets? You know what I'm saying? Or the Cody Bellingers of the world, who we've seen be great. We've seen be a former league MVP, but obviously just the one of the most precipitous drop-offs I've ever seen in baseball. Maybe he can bring that spark back up to Philly. I think he's been playing somewhat decently. He doesn't play every single day with the Cubs, but I don't know if I trust the Cody Bellinger. I don't know if there's a true outfielder target that I specifically like, but hey, you never know. Brandon Marsh was one of those guys, right? Like Brandon Marsh came over in that Scott Kingery trade, and look at him now. I think he's batting like 300 right now. Him and Bohm have been just such an absolute surprise for the Phillies this year. And
I love Bohm. It's so funny. Last year we were talking about Bohm was like the story of the year where he's like, I hate playing here after an era. And now it's like when I look at Bohm, it's like he's like truly one of the bright spots on this team.
100%. Bohm's like, I said it. I started tweeting about him last year. I said he was literally like my favorite Philly last year, just because like the dude he just grinded and worked hard. And then after he was, because how Philly fans get, right? Like we both from Philly. Like we know how we all get. We know how sensitive we can get. And he said, I effing hate it. He literally said on the field, camera called him like, mouth reading lips. He said, I effing hate it here. Like, and then he owned it after the game, right? He owned it after the game. He said, look, man, like, I said what I said, and I'm gonna bounce back. And then he came through He came through for the Phillies in the playoffs in a couple different moments last year, and this year he's just been an absolute dog. So I love Bohm. I can't speak highly enough of him. Right now, he's batting 280. He has an OPS of 754, 9 home runs, 57 RBIs, and he has 15 doubles this year. So shout out to Bowman, man. Like that's my dude right there. I love Bowman. I love Stott. I think those two dudes stepping up this year. Like the Phillies would really be like in serious trouble if those two didn't step up this year. Them two and Nick Castellanos. So shout out to them two, man. They really, especially Bohm switching positions too. So shout out to Bohm for doing that too. So man, yeah, I love him. I can't even say enough good words about him, honestly.
So if you had to give out an MVP, it's probably Castellanos.
Has to be because I'll say this, right? So last year, Nick Castellanos was absolutely bludgeoned by Philly fan base because he signed that big deal, right?
Yeah,
rightfully so. He's a great player. He's a great player, and he's proven that this year. But last year, his numbers literally at the end of last year are matching his current numbers for this season. So Castellanos is already like up there with his home run numbers, already up there with his RBI numbers from last year. And the dude is just he put his head down, right? He finally got comfortable. I don't know if it's that Ben Simmons house curse or whatever it was, but he finally got comfortable, and then he came back with a vengeance, and then he made the All-Star team. So Castellanos to me is like by far the best player on the Phillies this year. And on top of that, his glove in the outfield has been great. Like he cuts off balls like exactly where they need to be. Last year he was sort of a mess too, even in the field. So he cuts off balls exactly where they need to be. He gets the ball in the infield where it needs to be. He runs the right, correct route to getting the baseball. So shout out to Nick, man. Like,
yeah, I love the biggest thing I love about Nick right now is that every time he hits a home run, something awful happens. Like I'm pretty sure you saw like the situation with Tom Brennan,
yeah.
And it's just like
ones.
like every single time, like and it's like the running joke on social media, and it's absolutely hilarious.
There's like 5 different scenarios where Nick's honestly there's like 10 of them, and this goes back to like his Reds days, his Tigers days, where like something serious is going to be talked about during the game, and then he'll just Castellanos with a home run, and there's Nick Castellanos with a home run. Like it's crazy how that happens to him every single time. But seriously, man, shout out to Castellanos. Like he's been the dude for the Phillies this year. Like the hate last year was so loud, but the praise this year is so quiet, and I don't understand why. Mm-hmm. But that's Philly for you, right? Like that's how the fans be, man. Like there's never the praise is never loud enough unless like you're the Philly guy, if that makes sense,
Yeah. So FanDuel Sportsbook, our sponsor at the Ringer, they're giving the Phillies a 64% chance at going to the playoffs, minus 180 yes, plus 142 no. Are you thinking we make the playoffs? What's our best case scenario for this season? What's our worst case scenario?
I mean, that's basically like a pick 'em, right? That minus 180 and that what was it?
I wouldn't say it's a pick 'em. A pick 'em was like more so like minus 110.
120, yeah, okay. All right. Well,
yeah.
Me personally, I think just with the amount of home games that they have coming up, there's no way in hell they don't make the playoffs. That's unless they, completely just collapse. Me personally, like I don't even think they really if they need a trade in order to win the World Series. I think they need to make a move in order to win the World Series. Like I said, that's going to be dependent on a corner outfielder or a corner infielder. For me personally, I think the pitching is actually fine. I think you can go away. You can get away with Taijuan Walker and Zach Wheeler and Nola during the playoffs is where all that really matters. But yeah, I mean, I 100%. Give me that all day. They definitely make the playoffs. I think so. What about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I think we make the playoffs. I'm not really that crazy about Arizona, nor am I that crazy about Miami. I think we should be able to pass those teams. And then the one thing,
I think Miami's super dangerous though. You don't think so?
I mean, they have a minus 5 point differential, so it feels like to me they're a little bit lucky. Now, obviously, you have a guy in Luis Arias who just basically almost hitting 400. He's at 383. So, right. I mean, obviously that's scary. And they did beat us. Like we were 16. We're 16-5 in our last 21 games. That's like the first series we lost in like 3 weeks. Yeah, so
I think that was just because it was really run out of gas, if I'm being honest. But the Marlins, they got some guys over there, man. Like you got to think about the pitching too, right? Like I don't know as far as what their team ERA is, but they do have a Cy Young winner. He's not even playing that good this year. He's not playing well at all. He's not playing well at all. But still, that's a Cy Young winner. And Luzardo, I kind of like him. He's pretty solid, 3.29 ERA. It's like I said, a lot of that stuff really comes down to pitching. And they got some hitters on that lineup too. Like, don't sleep on, Arias, like you just said, and De La Cruz, and I don't know when Jazz Chisholm is coming. I like him, but Jazz isn't all that great. But let's see what happens when he comes back. Like, they got some dudes over there.
So that is the local angle for the Philly special. I'm Raheem Palmer, Rastradamus. We got Clifford, Augustin in the building. Y'all know how it's going down. Check us next time on the Philly special, the local angle. Y'all know what it is.
Welcome on in to episode 265, I believe it is, of the Full Go podcast with Jason Goff, brought to you by The Ringer. And of course, Spotify is the gang. And this is now the time where we do the local angle, right? Got to hit them with them angles. I'm not going to do the whole Drake thing. I'm caught up from the Drake concert last week. I'm still singing Drake songs that obviously weren't meant for me to sing. But this is the local angle. Shout out to all our people over there at FanDuel TV. You can catch us Sundays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays right here on The Ringer and on Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, fellas, Chris, Kyle, Tony, in spirit. Tony, by the way, we're a 4-man group. Tony, by the way, he hit us with the text message. Hey man, I taught a class tonight. I'm not gonna be able to be on the pod with y'all tonight. I don't know what that meant. I taught a class, I've used a lot of things to get out of podding and to get out of work, but taught a class was something that I didn't know I had. And you really can't question it. Chris looked at the phone and said, hey man, teach the youth. And I'm like, okay. I wanted to hit him with the Michael Jordan meme, F them kids, but it is what it is, right? So the 4-man crew that you have before you is what we roll with every single night here on the Full Go podcast. So we are in the sports abyss, right? If you see the ESPYs on your television, there is nothing to talk about. The week after the All-Star break or the All-Star game is the sports abyss. This is where people are getting into trouble and it creates content. This is where things are happening scandal-wise and it creates content. Or you get yourself a good old-fashioned trade. And guess what, y'all? I'm about to get on my BS, right? Whether that be Bull, or Bill Simmons, but I'm about to get on my BS because I have figured out a way to make sure that Damian Lillard gets to Miami and Portland gets what they want. And of course, there's going to have a Chicago Bulls angle for y'all. So I think about when DeMar DeRozan landed on our shores after an offseason where he was left in a room of free agents that, seemingly had a value, but didn't find their landing spot. And we now come to find out that the Los Angeles Lakers made a very unwise decision and not, kicking the tires on DeMar. And DeMar has gone over the last 2 years to be on the redemption campaign or the I told you suckers campaign. And he scored at a high rate. And by the way, Ryan Russillo, from the jump, when he said that this was the worst fit, I felt like it spurred DeMar on to do what DeMar has done over the last couple of years. But it's also landed the Bulls in the play-in section of the NBA's Eastern Conference playoffs. And that's not where you want to be. And this will be the final year of DeMar DeRozan's contract. And of course, while we are taping this, it's the first day that he is eligible for a contract extension. Now, whatever happens over the next few days, weeks, or the duration of this offseason heading into training camp, I think can steer the Bulls organization in one direction or another. And especially with all the things that have come out about the powers that be telling Arturas Karnisovas and Mark Eversley, hey, got yourself into this position, going to give you every chance to get yourself out of it. It kind of leaves room for interpretation. If I'm in that situation and I hear that from my bosses and my higher ups, I'm thinking, all right, I'm not about to set up for anybody else after they take this job. It's going to be some fertile proving ground with draft picks and prospects and developed talent. No, I'm going to keep taking my swings. But if It is the other way around, where it's on the other side of the spectrum, and you, as Arturas Karnisovas and Mark Eversley, are allowed to work your way back into a winning situation by taking maybe a step backwards, but also a step forwards financially. You got to think about the Lonzo Ball situation. Will there be a waive and stretch provision? Will there be a disabled player exception? What's going to happen with him, right? He's got a player option still, and of course, he is going to invoke that player option. It's not looking good with the kind of surgery that he had and the kind of knee cartilage repair or replacement that he had. So we don't know anybody who's come back from that injury. So knowing that and knowing what the Bulls have not done in the offseason in adding a big splash free agent at that point guard position, and who knows what the market would bear, but Javon Carter is a serviceable starter and a guy who's going to provide a different profile for them in terms of taking 3-pointers that maybe Patrick Beverley turned down last year at the end of that run after he was acquired. So the Bulls have to change their shot profile. They have to change their offensive profile, and thank God for the trade machine, because I won't say jumped into it, because it took me a little while. You know, y'all out there with the trade machine, I know y'all go crazy. I know y'all mess around and become de facto GMs or, Monday morning GMs, but it took me a little while to figure this thing out. And if you look at it from the Portland standpoint, from the Miami standpoint, from the Bulls standpoint, this thing could not be more simple to me. If you're Miami and all you have is your eyes on Damian Lillard, which is seemingly what Pat Riley and Eric Spoelstra are trying to pull off, you can get them to trade Portland. You can get Portland to trade DeMar DeRozan and Alex Caruso and Josh Richardson. Now you ask yourself, what are the Bulls going to get back? Well, Kyle Lowry's $29 million, 1-year expiring contract, a guy who's been through the NBA wars, a guy who's won NBA championships, and a guy who can mentor young point guards such as Kobe White. And if you bring Ayo Dosunmu back, Ayo Dosunmu, it'll make sense in the long run, but the domino that everybody's waiting to fall is that Damian Lillard trade. And if anybody else is going to be involved in the details of the minutia of a trade, guys are just still waiting to see what the market is going to bear. And I think Ayo Dosunmu is one of those guys as well. But if Kyle Lowry's on a team and he's mentoring guys like Kobe White and some of the young guards on this squad, it can't hurt. Caleb Martin, a guy who's got 2 years left on the deal, is $6.8 million. He showed you what he was in the playoffs. He's an adequate defender, above adequate defender. I think a damn good playmaker, and also a dude who isn't scared to take a shot and hit a shot. And then you throw in Nikola Jovic and Highsmith, who I thought was, a decent energy guy, especially in the playoff run for the Miami Heat. And of course, the Bulls love energy guys, a la Jalen Green and the dudes that have put, so many, highlight plays over the last couple of seasons because they have been depended on in real high leverage roles. I don't think Highsmith is a guy that's a far departure from a dude like Javonte Green if you're moving forward. And of course, Miami Heat, they would get Damian Lillard. And then you pair him with Jimmy Butler and you move your way through the Eastern Conference. Will they win the East with that pairing? I don't know. What is Boston going to look like with Jason Tatum? What are they going to look like with Jaylen Brown and now Kristaps Porzingis, who they extended, right? Like, what are the Milwaukee Bucks going to look like? Will this be the last hurrah in a window that seems to be closing because of injuries around Giannis Antetokounmpo? And of course, the Philadelphia 76ers, we're still waiting to find out what James Harden's plans are going to be and how that team is going to look and what's going to be different about Joel Embiid, especially postseason Joel Embiid going forward. So the Miami Heat put themselves not only in Eastern Conference contention, which they made the NBA Finals out the East last year, but they put themselves in NBA championship contention. And the Portland Trailblazers get a gritty defender in Alex Caruso, a glue guy who's going to teach the young dudes who aren't the stars, the building blocks, the pillars of that franchise going forward. This is how you find your way in the NBA. His $9.5 million over the next 2 years fits comfortably under the cap for them. And then DeMar DeRozan, 1 year, $28.6 million. To provide mentorship, leadership, maybe some shots made, but most importantly, guiding guys like Scoot Henderson, guiding guys like Anthony Simons, guiding guys like Shaedon Sharpe. I mean, he did it in San Antonio for a couple of years. He's done it here with the Bulls these last couple of years. And if you're thinking to yourself, hey, are you in a hurry to get rid of DeMar DeRozan? I just think this team is capped with him. And you've seen what he could do. And also, he's a highly valuable, I think, commodity, especially with a contract that fits under $30 million for the mentoring role that he will have. And of course, as he goes on, he's 33, 34 years old now. The next time the Bulls are good, if he does move on or if he does stay and you get re-signed, how are you capitalizing on that window, knowing that these last 2 years with premier DeMar DeRozan, before the right side of his body started to shut down a little bit this past year, like, how are you going to get better? And will he get better with age? I mean, we already starting to see some of these injuries. So, in a sports abyss kind of day, I solved 3 teams' problems just like that. The Bulls mess around and get themselves a veteran leader to mentor their young backcourt, a wing player that they need that's a 3-and-D dude and Caleb Martin who isn't scared to take a shot. And most importantly for the Bulls franchise, you hand the ball to your max player and Zach LaVine and have the game prove to him what he is and what he isn't in terms of the expectations being higher now and also some of the late game stuff having to be refined but not being able to do it on a nightly basis because DeMar DeRozan is your running mate. Chris? Now, I know this trade was thrown together haphazardly in the sports abyss, like I just mentioned, but the feelers out there in Portland, does it feel like Damian Lillard is going to move anytime soon? Because I know he's got 4 years left on that deal, and Scoot Henderson is looking like he's going to be the truth, and you got some really good young players there as well. Are people in the city ready to move on a little bit?
They are ready to move on. I think the fans have been through so much here in Portland when it comes to Damian Lillard. And I think like for the last year, they've been sort of preparing for this moment. And any of the sort of holdout stuff or like what he's going to do or like where he's going to go, like I think people are just kind of like, they're just like waiting. Everybody's excited about Scoot. Everybody's excited about Shaden. They want that new thing to come in. It's, with all that bling, that bling during the draft, people got really caught up in it, So I think people are already on Scoot in general. And we're sort of like, it's kind of like that Brandon Roy thing. It's like, hey, Brandon Roy, did your thing, give us our moments. We love you. You're always going to be a Blazer. And I think that's sort of the general vibe with Dame as well, too. I think people are ready to move on. I love Dame. I'd love for him to stay, but you already know he's not happy. So whatever. And all the word from the top is like they're thinking about they're going to hold on to him until something good comes along and he could be there or he could not be. It's like I've been hearing good things about like, good deals coming in through like the Raptors and stuff like that. So, I just want him to see him, go somewhere and be cool. Be the Heat, go to the Heat, go whatever. You gave us our moments, man. Like we love you and you always be a player. So I mean, you can only do what he's done with the surrounding cast to a certain level, right? And the guys hit that moment in their career where it's time to go win something, and he's at that moment. And also, man, Scoot's got that it. He's got that it, dog. Like he has been born and bred for these moments. The last 2 years has been training for this spotlight. And I think this jump shot's going to iron itself out. I think they're super talented and athletic with Shaden Sharp. I think that's a dude. Like we need an old school. All I do is dunk and move people around with my athleticism, dude. And I think he's the next one in line to do that, vertically challenging people. And also, I mean, Anthony Simons is a cat who's going to mess around and get you 24 points a game. Like it's not like they're going to be, Scoot Henderson is going to be the dude who's relied upon for all the scoring. I think it's perfectly in line for the Portland Trailblazers to be where they need to be in 2 or 3 years with the pillars that they have in place, which is why if they want to play hardball with Damian Lillard, go ahead. But at the same time, at some point you got to move on and show these young dudes that they are the sole focus. You're welcome. NBA, you're welcome Portland, you're welcome Miami, and of course you're welcome Bulls. This is what happens in mid-July when you're sitting around watching the ESPYs and watching All-Star Game fall out and Home Run Derby talking all these other things and not worried about the Sox and the Cubs like you shouldn't be. You start jumping in that trade machine like I did. All right, y'all. Y'all can check us out every Sunday, every Tuesday, every Thursday right here on the Full Go Podcast. I'm Jason Goff. We're brought to you by The Ringer. Spotify is the gang, and this has been The Local Angle.
Welcome back to the Local Angle here on FanDuel TV. It's your buddy JJ John Jastremski, the host of New York, New York. And we have just returned from Seattle. The All-Star game is in the rearview mirror. And it really dawned on me and hit home to me a simple fact and a sad reality that you're seeing with the New York baseball teams. You got that tale crystal clear from a Yankee and a Met perspective. Ugly, ugly, ugly. To the point where the Yankees on Sunday fired their hitting coach. And we found out on Monday, they are going completely outside the box in trying to find themselves a new strategy, a new voice, a new message to somehow, some way jumpstart this lineup, getting Sean Casey out of the MLB network, out of the broadcast booth, and now in the dugout wearing the stash with Aaron Boone, his old buddy from Cincinnati, and trying to fix the New York Yankee lineup. Tell you this, the approach, the style, the positivity, his approach when he was a hitter back in the day for a long period of time with the Reds and the Tigers and the Red Sox, just to name a few. If that's the sort of approach we're going to see with the New York Yankees in the final 75 games, that's a good thing. To me, the Yankees, they got nothing to lose here. Their lineup has been as bad as can be in the first half. The numbers indicate as such. When you're in the same conversation as the Detroit Tigers and the Kansas City Royals and the Oakland A's from a whole lot of statistical categories, that basically should tell you all you need to know. It has been, in many ways, historically bad offensively for a team and an organization that's used to slugging, that's used to hitting and hitting at a high level. The approach has never been worse from a Yankee perspective. So, yeah, it's worth the shot. I'm glad it's a guy like Sean Casey as opposed to just taking somebody in the organization and promoting them. At least you're getting a new voice. We'll see if it makes a difference. We'll see if it can wake Anthony Rizzo up and Giancarlo Stanton up and revive DJ LeMahieu and Josh Donaldson. But I know this, it can't hurt. So I want to applaud the Yankees and their brass for thinking outside the box a little bit here. And for the first time in the Brian Cashman tenure, they go and dismiss a coach in the middle of the season, which is something they have never done. The Yankees have 3 with the Colorado Rockies right out of the gate. They have a stretch now over the next 12 where they don't play a team with a winning record. The best team you're going to play in that span is going to be the New York Mets. And we know, and we'll get to that in a moment, their issues and their problems. The Yankees got to start winning some games. The season ended today. They're on the outside looking in. And if we're talking about the Yankees on the outside looking in, I think it opens the door to serious conversation regarding the future of Brian Cashman, the future of Aaron Boone, the future of a whole lot of people within the analytics and the scouting department where the Yankees are not getting results. So there's a whole lot at stake. There's a whole lot of line the next 75 games or so. And, you know, I saw the only report earlier on Thursday. If you want to entertain the idea that the Yankees are players for Shohei Ohtani, be my guest. I'm not delusional, okay? I'm not sipping that sort of Kool-Aid. This is not the sort of move that's going to happen because I haven't seen it from a Yankee perspective in forever where they've put all their eggs in the basket and have basically sold the farm to go and get a particular player. It's just not how they operate anymore. So you're telling me they're going to do that for a rental of Shohei Ohtani, assuming the Angels, number one, are going to trade him. And then this is a guy, remember, who wanted no part in coming to New York in 2017 when the Yankees were head over heels for Ohtani. They couldn't wait to get Ohtani. And he basically was like, nah, not interested. I'm finding my way to the West Coast. So Yankee fans can dream. Met fans with Steve Cohen's wallet, they can dream in the offseason too. I don't see Shohei Ohtani in the Big Apple. I think Shohei Ohtani is going to stay out on the West Coast, whether that's with the Angels or the Dodgers or the Padres who have crazy money or even the Mariners. All the fans in Seattle which come to Seattle trying to maybe sway Shohei. It won't be here. I think the Yankees will be active. I think they'll look to upgrade their offense. It's not going to be with Shohei Ohtani. Now, Met perspective. The first half of the season was a dud. They missed a golden opportunity on Sunday to really have momentum going into the All-Star break. Scherzer gets lit up by the Padres again. It was like a carbon copy of what you saw in the wild card series. And the Mets, well under 500, 7.5 games out of a wild card spot, have to immediately hit the ground running right out of the gate against the Los Angeles Dodgers this weekend. And I know some are going to say, well, is that fair? It's one series. You don't want to get nuts about one series. They got like a 10-game audition. If I'm Steve Cohen and if I own the New York Mets, it's very simple. Show me now over the next 10 games why we should be active in trying to improve the roster. Show me why I should take more resources and more money and maybe more chips out of the minor league system and invest in this current team. Because from what you've seen so far this year, you have no reason to believe that. Underperformance from way too many guys in this lineup. Even though if you look at the Met offense, it doesn't look as bad as the Yankee offense. But Starling Marte hasn't been as good. Jeff McNeil has taken a major step back, and he needs to show up immediately in 2023. His golf game is where it needs to be. Jeff McNeil at the plate, not so much. Well under 200 in his last 30 games. Even Pete Alonso. Pete Alonso was at the All-Star game, participated in all the festivities. The power numbers are good. Sitting 210. The Mets need a lot more out of Pete Alonso. They started to get more out of Lindor, and Lindor had a really good stretch going into the All-Star break. But all hands on deck for the Mets. Go show me against the Dodgers that you're going to be in this thing. Then go and have a good end of July to the point where you're within 4 games. You're within 5 games. Setting yourselves up to go and make a run over the final 2 months of this year. But if you don't see it now, then I think you open up the door and you open up the possibilities to being a seller and kind of retooling and restocking and reassessing your franchise. Maybe at the end of July, get ready for next year and the following year and kind of reassessing where you're at when I think a whole lot of Met fans thought going into the year this was a World Series caliber team. And it's over a half of baseball. It's over 81 games. They have looked nothing close to that. So this is a big couple of days for New York baseball. Normally the dog days of summer are exactly that. Not for the Yankees and the Mets. They got to win games. It's pedal to the metal time. If they're going to find themselves in the same position they were a year ago, which is in the postseason. Right now, the odds of that being the case in the second week of October, I'd give you right now, honestly, 3-1, 4-1, that both the Yankees and the Mets find their way to the playoffs. That might actually be too low, to be honest with you. That might be too low. FanDuel's going to have to come up with a boost for us on that. Yankees and the Mets to be in the playoffs. I mean, the Yankees are a small favorite to get in. The Mets are a sizable underdog to get in. What do we say, FanDuel? 4-1, 5-1? I like the sound of that. Now, the other big story in town, as we start to ramp up and get closer to the start of the football season and training camps and all that good stuff, a season of a whole lot of hype and anticipation and excitement across the board. Well, the worst kept secret is now official. The New York Jets and Aaron Rodgers and Robert Saleh, who was golfing with my buddy Beningo yesterday, I can't wait to get the detailed scouting report on that, are going to be on Hard Knocks. And that's fantastic for us. And if I'm the Jets, I know the coaching staff didn't want it. I know they were hesitant. Embrace it. Remember, the last time the Jets were on Hard Knocks, 2010, I remember it well. They were fresh off a trip to the AFC title game. This was peak Rex Ryan. This was peak Mark Sanchez. And they backed it up. I mean, they made it all the way back to the AFC title game, did they not? Beat Peyton Manning, beat Tom Brady. I think any Jet fan who's reasonable and is rational would sign for an appearance in an AFC title game tomorrow. How could you not? Jets haven't been in the playoffs since the last time they were on Hard Knocks. So maybe it comes full circle. I'd embrace it. And from a content standpoint, it's amazing for us on New York, New York. You can tell there's a little extra glee and a little extra pep in my step thinking about each and every weekly episode and some of the nuggets and some of the interesting tidbits we might get along the way. So I'm stoked about that. You know what else Jet fans should be stoked about? You don't got to worry about a holdout dominating your conversation on Hard Knocks. The Jets go and pay Quinn Williams a ton of money. They make him one of the highest paid defensive linemen in the NFL. And I always felt you would reach this sort of conclusion. The Jets will win now. You're telling me they're going to want to go into this year without one of their best defensive players? They're going to find a way to get it done. And I know there are a lot of posturing and there's a lot of back and forth and there's a lot of uneasiness maybe between the Giants and Saquon Barkley at this point in time, where people are wondering, oh, the Giants holding out because he's a running back. Is Saquon holding out because he wants to get his? This will not be, remember I said this, a repeat of Le'Veon Bell. There's no chance in the world that's going to happen. Saquon Barkley will be a New York Giant and will be on the field week 1 against the Dallas Cowboys. I don't know when he reports. I don't know if he's there for the start of training camp. He will be ready to go by the start of the season. This is all part of the posturing and the negotiation. So my advice, Giant fans, take a page on what you just saw from the Jets and Joe Douglas and Quinn Williams. They got it done. The Giants and Barkley will ultimately find a way to get it done, and he will be on the field helping out our buddy Daniel Jones as soon as this season gets underway. So, starting to plant the seed, get ready for football. Hard Knocks, the Jets. I don't think Robert Saleh is going to be as entertaining as Rex Ryan, but still, get your popcorn ready nonetheless. All right, calls out of the gate. Then we'll have some fun with some of the guys we had at All-Star Week. All sorts of festivities. I'm still in a festive spirit for that matter. New York, here on the Local Angle. Hopefully I'll have better second half baseball to talk about as opposed to what I had to deal with this entire first half. We'll be back next week. We're coming right back.